Okay. You know, they don't teach you how to respond to that kind of thing. So, I'm on a timer. The countdown has started. I'm just kidding. Thank you. Y'all are very, very generous. I really appreciate it. Aaron Taylor, I can't believe you said Florida. I mean, you know what it's like to be, back there in prayer, and you're like, oh, the state west of here, and you're like, yes, God, Alabama, and you go, Florida. You're like, listen, we forgive you. That's what tonight's about, kind of. Well, hey, good evening, and welcome to College Nights. If we don't know each other, my name is Daniel. I am a resident here at Athens Church, which... Those people cheering are the other residents, but they're not necessarily here. I am a resident here, which essentially means that I'm in grad school half the time, and then I'm also on staff here working with our middle and high schoolers, and I love it, and it's some of the most fun. But being in grad school, I'm in seminary, which essentially just means that I'm studying to become a professional Christian. It just means I'm studying to love God more than you do, and that's okay, and I'm just joking. That's not what it is at all, but I'm loving it. I really am. I love being in seminary and learning. It wasn't anything that I thought I'd actually ever enjoy, and being on staff here the past almost 3 years has been a joy, and it's been a gift. Because being a part of a church that is all about unchurched people is actually a really rare thing, and I hope it's not something that you tend to overlook. We're one of the few churches that exist that have this actual vision that we're a church for unchurched people. If you've never sat down and actually thought about what that means, it's absurd. And we're a church that caters to people who don't know a thing about Jesus. And so I love being a part of a community like this. I love being a part of a church like this. But the truth is that I haven't always been a part of churches like this. So I'm going to give you a little bit of my story and how I got here. I actually grew up Southern Baptist. Do we have any Southern Baptists in the house? I can tell because you're cheering for yourself. So I grew up Southern Baptist, but I grew up, which essentially, and you know how this goes. You know what this means. I grew up Southern Baptist, so it was rules galore. It got weird for me sometimes because if I wore shorts, if I wore jeans with rips in them, or if I wore a hat to church, the senior pastor, who was my uncle, would ask me to leave. I'm serious, go home. So I didn't just woke up. I didn't just go to a church that was purely Southern Baptist. I also am Hispanic, and so I grew up at a church that was also Cuban. And so it's Southern Baptist. Did we just get a woo? There's more of us. You get it. I didn't just grow up Southern Baptist. I grew up Cuban Southern Baptist. So it's Southern Baptist rules, but spicy because we're Spanish. So it just it was uncomfortable and it was crazy, but it was a lot of fun. And the truth is that I honestly, as much as I like to make fun of it and joke around about it, that church and those experiences that I had growing up have 100% shaped every part of me. The reason I am who I am today and the reason I do what I do and I act the way I act is because this church, although we make fun of it all the time, has shaped me into who I am. Because especially as a kid, because I grew up experiencing two very significant things in my life that I've probably told you about at some point in my life. The first one was something called Vacation Bible School. You ever been to one of those? Dude, VBS, baby. Those were so fun because how do you get kids to come to church? You call it school. It works, apparently. And so it was only during the summers, it was a whole week. It was a blast. It was so fun. I don't know why it was called school. When I turned 13, they changed the name from Vacation Bible School to Vacation Bible Extreme. So I don't know, there was fire now. It was kind of cool, I guess. There was a camel up front. This is just a glorified Vacation Bible School, I guess. But I loved Vacation Bible Schools. I owe a lot of who I am to that. And then the second thing that helped shape exactly who I am today was another version of school at church. It was Sunday school. You remember that? Sunday school was fun. I like to think of it honestly, I don't really view it as Sunday school. I viewed it as my version of a small group. It's essentially what it is. You get together with 5 of your friends and a teacher and you just learn about Jesus. So the better way to view Sunday school is honestly to view it as just a giant small group. But essentially I walk into a room, and I remember one day actually specifically because it was one of these days that my Sunday school teacher decided to go down a way that I never thought we would go, and it ended up shaping me, and it ended up just convincing me of things that I would have never thought of. But you know how it is. If you've been to Sunday school, you walk in with 5 of your buddies. There's chairs there that are far too small. So you sit down, and you've got this is the best part of Sunday school, y'all. I remember this poor old lady. Her name was Mrs. Cottle. Your Sunday school teacher was always this 95-year-old dinosaur woman who was there when the ark was built, and she's like seen it all, but oddly, she's 95 and like amped. Like she is amped at all times. So I walk in, I sit down, and I'm literally in 5th grade, and Mrs. Cottle's there, and she goes, okay, hey, did you bring your Bibles? And we're like, yeah, we brought our Bibles. Like we brought them, we're excited. And me and my buddies are like, yeah, Bibles. And she starts to teach us about a guy named Paul. But as she's teaching us about Paul, she starts to tell us that Paul hasn't always been Paul, that at one point in his life, he was known as Saul. And again, we're in 5th grade, we're 11-year-olds, and she starts to tell us, yeah, he wasn't always Paul, he was Saul, and Saul loved to kill Christians, and he threw them in jail, and we're there like, wow, I'm encouraged. Like, we're borderline about to walk away from faith. I was atheist for like 30 seconds, I swear. I was like, this is exactly what I want to be a part of. And she starts to tell us that Saul, actually got his life transformed by Jesus one day. But the way she explained it to me was he had his life transformed in 2 different ways. She goes, Saul became Paul when he had an encounter with Jesus, and he was saved and he was set free. I'm 11 years old and I'm like sick. I don't know what that means, but thank you. And so she starts to tell us that like he spent the majority and the rest of his life writing letters to churches and visiting and helping people like learn what it's like to follow Jesus and learn to love him a little bit more. And she takes us to a book called Galatians. She teaches us that Paul, essentially what Galatians is Paul is writing a letter to a group of people in Galatia, and he's teaching them about what it is to love Jesus. And she takes us to this verse in Galatians 5:1. It says, it is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. And I'm reading this, I'm like, man, that's really fine and dandy. But essentially what she's doing is she's introducing us to a concept called freedom. And she's telling us that he had his life transformed because he was saved and he was set free. But to me in 5th grade, I have no idea what this means. The most freedom I'd ever experienced was coming home from school and figuring out if I can go outside or not. Like that's freedom to me. I didn't know what freedom was. And so you fast forward to junior year of college and like things have changed a little bit. Like I've aged, I'm 21 now, and I drive down to Atlanta and I'm gonna get coffee with one of my mentors. And I pull into a Starbucks and I sit down with them, and you've probably had a conversation with somebody older than you at one point. They ask you all the generic questions like, hi, what do you think about the dogs? Oh, they're great. So back then they weren't. And he's asking me all the questions about like, how's life and how are things going? And if I'm gonna be completely honest with you, with myself and with him, junior year of college, like not well at all. Like not good. It's like one of those years that I look back and I'm like, decide to black out of my memory. It wasn't a good year for me. It was confusing because I was doing the things that I wanted to be doing at the places I wanted to be doing them. My life was going kind of the way I wanted it to go, but I felt confused because I couldn't lay my head down on my pillow at night and actually feel like satisfied in my soul. And if you would have asked me back then and been like, man, how you doing? I would have never been like, dude, something's missing. But like looking back in the context of what I feel and where I am now, something was definitely missing. And so I'm telling him this, and I'm like, man, honestly, I'm just not doing well. I don't know what I'm feeling. I just feel lost. I'm doing the things that I want to do, and whenever I want to do them, but something's just not hitting. And he brings this verse back up again. He goes, Daniel, did you know it is for freedom that Christ has set us free? Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. But this time I'm frustrated. I'm like, brother, I get it. Like, don't go back to something about an egg yolk and freedom and like it is for freedom that Christ has set you free. Like, I get it, but like that's not what I'm here for. Like, I'm here to tell you that like life's not going my way. I don't know why this is coming up again. And he looks me dead in the face and he tells me something that I'm never going to forget for the rest of my life. He goes, Daniel, you need to remember there's a difference between being saved and being free. And now I've got goosebumps going from my head down to my toes. Because I'm like, there's a difference between being saved and being free. And he keeps explaining it to me. He's like, the way you're living is like you're living out half the gospel. I'm like, what? And this guy's known me since I was like 5 years old, but he keeps the conversation going. And he goes, I've known you for a long time. He goes, you got saved when you were 12, but I've never seen you free. And this time I'm not in 5th grade, and this time it's not going over my head because this makes perfect sense to me. And the truth of the matter is, and a lot of the reason my heart breaks for a lot of you is because at some point in your life, and a lot of you are there right now, like you kind of get this. Like a lot of you grew up in a Christian household. You've been Christians the majority of your life, but there's a really big difference between being saved and being free. You feel it because at some point in your life, you gave your life to Jesus and nothing's changed. So you know what this tension feels like. You know exactly what this is like. Because at some point, this is what 5th grade me, junior year of college me, and you have in common. Your friends, culture, your country have convinced you that freedom and independence are the same thing. That freedom and independence go hand in hand. At some point, you've convinced yourself that if I do the things that I want to do, at the times I want to do them, at the places I want to do them, if I live the life the way I want to live it, I'm actually going to experience freedom. When the thing that breaks my heart the most for you is that that's not working anymore, is it? The very same thing you thought was gonna bring you freedom, if I do the life the way I wanna do it, the same thing you thought would bring you freedom is the very same thing that you're enslaved to. And now you feel stuck. And now you're addicted. And now you just find yourself like performing, and it's like you need hit after hit, and now you're in every single sphere, every circle that you run into. Now you're going to your frat and your sorority and performing and doing things you never thought you would do because you're obsessed with who they tell you you are. You've convinced yourself that if you live life the way you just want to live it, that's what freedom's like. And a lot of you, this is clicking and it's making sense for the first time, and some of you, you've felt this for a really long time. It's not working anymore. But my what if for you is like, what if there's actually a version of your life? What if there's an actual version of freedom that exists that will leave you 100% satisfied with who you are? What if there's a version of freedom that exists that you can actually lay your head in your pillow at night and be fully satisfied? What if there's a version of life that you don't have to actually walk around your spheres in Athens and actually like start performing for everybody and be so obsessed and feel down all the time? Like, what if there's a version of life that you can actually feel whole because it's available? Because the good news is that it is for freedom that you've been set free. That's the good news. It is for freedom you've been set free. So freedom has always been available. It's always going to be available. And the questions that you and I are asking when it comes to freedom now is A, what is it? B, how do I get it? And C, how do I keep it? And in order to answer a question like this, I feel like we need to go back. I mean like way back, like Sunday school back, but I'm not 95. We need to go way back for a little bit. It's kind of the theme of this entire night. We're talking about Exodus tonight, and so if you brought a Bible, and maybe you did, maybe you didn't, that's perfectly okay. We're actually headed to about Exodus 14. And in order to get to Exodus 14 to tell you what's happening, it's cool because I'm standing in a desert, but it's really nice. Is Exodus 14, in order to actually capture what's going on, I gotta catch you up for a second. So we're in Egypt, right? We're in Egypt. And there's a guy named Joseph, and not Jesus' dad, Joseph. This is the guy who's got a cloak of many robes, and his brothers tried to kill him, and the whole ordeal. He's in power in Egypt, and all of a sudden his generation dies off, and a new king has come into power, but this king's not a good one. And it says that as you read Exodus, the Israelites' number starts multiplying. They start growing and growing, and all of a sudden the king starts to feel fear. And fear seems to be a driving factor for a lot of people, and he makes a pretty rash decision and decides that I don't know what to do with them, so we're going to enslave them. So he takes an entire country, essentially, of people and enslaves them. And so that's kind of where the whole freedom story picks off, because now the Israelites are realizing, wait, this isn't how I thought life was going to go. Like, this wasn't how I thought this was going to be, like, at all. And they start to feel pain, and they are stuck in their slavery, and they don't know what to do. And the entire story of Exodus essentially starts off with a giant cry for help. The Israelites get to the point where like, this isn't what life is supposed to be like, and it starts off with a giant cry for help. Their freedom journey started off with a realization of this isn't freedom. Their freedom journey started off with a realization of I'm actually a slave. This wasn't how I thought it would be. And in Exodus 2, 24 and 25, it says, God heard their groaning, and he remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Isaac, and with Jacob. And so God looked on the Israelites and was concerned about them. And if you read this and you read it way too fast, you're going to completely, well, to me at least, miss the whole point of it. The Israelites are crying out for help. They're saying, please help us, please free us. They're in a realization of this wasn't how life was supposed to be. I'm a slave, I need your help. And God is concerned. Like, please don't overlook that. This means that when they're crying out for help, God is concerned about them. He feels pain for them. He feels what they're feeling. He's sad with them. He's angry with them. He feels concerned for the things that they're concerned about. So God is concerned with what's going on. And I can almost promise you this, but when you cry out to God for help, he'll move. He feels what you feel. He is concerned with you. So they cry out for help. God answers, and he's concerned, and he raises up a guy named Moses. And maybe at some point in your life, you've heard of this guy. And God appears to him in a burning bush, because that's what your quiet times are like. You're in your dorm and your dresser catches on fire, and God starts speaking. And he tells Moses, hey, I'm going to free the people, but I want you to do it. And Moses is like, no, it won't be me. There's no way. I can't speak. I'm a terrible, there's no way. And God's like, it's going to be you. And he's like, okay. And then he goes into Egypt, and he goes to Pharaoh, and he says, God says to let my people go. And Pharaoh goes, wait, no, that's not actually going to happen. Sorry, buddy. And Moses is confused because he's like, God, you said he would do it. And he's like, keep asking. He's like, hey, God said to let my people go. And then this was the part of Sunday school that got cool. And for a lot of you, you're not really sure how you feel about the whole Bible thing. It's stories like this that might confuse you even more. All of a sudden, they get hit with 10 different plagues. And I'm not sure I can honestly recite every single one of them, but it starts raining frogs. That's believable. That's really easy. I understand where you're coming from. It starts locusts everywhere. They've got boils on their arm. At some point, it goes pitch black for 3 days straight. And the only people that have light are the Israelites. And then the entire river turns to blood, and their water source is gone, and now their cattle are dying. And then you get to the last one, and this seems to be the breaking point. The firstborn male of every Egyptian household dies. And this is the breaking point for Pharaoh. And he finally gets to a point where he says, you know what? Get out of here. Leave. You're free. And I can't imagine what the Israelites are feeling. This is it. They're products of 400 years of generational slavery. They're the ones that get to stand in front of a Pharaoh and him say, hey, you're free. Get out of here. I can't imagine what they're feeling. Their freedom journey is here. This is happening. They grab everything they own. They grab their children, their cattle. They grab their clothes, their money. They grab everything they have, and they head out. And freedom has finally come, and it's happening. Until when the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds about them and said, what have we done? We have left the Israelites go and have lost their services. So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 of the best chariots along with other chariots of Egypt with officers all over them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, king of Egypt, so that he pursued the Israelites who were marching out boldly. This is important. God was the one that hardened their hearts. And the Egyptians, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, horsemen and troops, pursued the Israelites and overtook them as they camped by the sea near Pi-Hahiroth, opposite Baal-Zephon. So all of a sudden, he's like, hey, you guys are free. Go ahead and get on out of here. And Pharaoh changes his mind. He's actually, if you read into the story, the part that I told you was kind of important. It really isn't even Pharaoh who changes his mind. It's God who changes his mind. And that's really important to remember. But he comes after them, and then the Israelites essentially start to realize, they're camped out at a sea. On their right, they have an ocean that hasn't been opened, and they don't know it's going to open. And on their left, they have Egyptians that are on their way to kill them and bring them back to slavery. And so their response is honestly feels absurd, because after everything they've seen, you're confused at how they would respond this way. It says, as Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified, and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die? What have you done to us by bringing us out of Egypt? Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. And you're reading this from like your perspective and you're like, hold on. God is following them as like a pillar in the night. They have seen it literally rain frogs. They have seen, and it's pretty evident that God is doing something crazy. And all of a sudden they start to get a little scared because they look right, the ocean's there, they look left, the Egyptians are on their way. It says that they start to feel fear, and their first response is, I want to go back. Their first response is, I want to go back. And you're reading this and you're like, hold on, like, I don't understand why you'd want to go back. Like, clearly God is up to something. Like, why would they want to go back? This isn't that crazy to you. I do this all the time. You do this all the time. You always want to go back to what you're most comfortable with. Of course they want to go back. Slavery is all they know. They want to go back to Egypt because they're convinced that, like, I know what's best for me. I want to go back. They're convinced because it's what they're most comfortable with. Slavery is what they're used to. And if you really get down to it and you understand where these guys are coming from, they don't know what freedom is. No one before them had been set free. So even in this moment, what they're looking for isn't freedom. They want what you and I want, relief. Relief is quicker. It's way faster. This is what we'll constantly go back to. Of course you want to go back. Slavery is all they know. Because for a lot of you, when you do go back, when things start to get scary, because fear seems to be a driving factor. For a lot of you, when you get into a conversation with a lot of your friends, this just honestly feels like a pro tip for you. A lot of what you're experiencing can either come down to fear or pain. And when those things show up and you get into a point in your life where you're scared or you're hurting or you just don't know where God is, you don't know what's happening, your first inclination will always be, I want to go back. And what you're looking for is relief. You'll always go back to, my parents said I would always be this way. You'll always go back to, she said no, but my phone doesn't. You'll always go back to trying harder. Some of you have been Christians for like what feels like the majority of your life, but the thing you keep going back to for relief is just trying harder. You'll start another devotional. You'll read your Bible a lot more. You'll pray harder. You'll try and figure it out. You'll start to try harder. That's your relief. A lot of you just go back to performing. You'll go back to acting and you'll do whatever they tell you to do, whatever they say, whatever they want you to say. You'll go back to performing because you need them to tell you who you are. What you're looking for isn't freedom. What they're looking for is relief. It was easier for God to get the Israelites out of Egypt than it was to get Egypt out of the Israelites. It was easier for God to get the Israelites out of Egypt than it was to get Egypt out of the Israelites. Slavery is all they know. It's all they know. So when things get difficult in your life, you're not really asking for freedom. You need something quicker. You want relief. It's the choice that you make. And for a lot of you, you're exhausted because going back feels like it takes so much out of you. It's exhausting. You're not sure the relief is even working anymore. And the way Moses responds to them is he responds in a way that the first time I read, I didn't really know how to feel, and I cried. Moses responds to them in a way that to me really helps encapsulate what freedom is. It says, Moses answered the people and said, do not be afraid. Fear seems to be a constant repetition of this story. Pharaoh got scared and it drove him to make some rash decisions. The Israelites got scared and they wanted to go back. Fear will drive a lot of what you do. Moses says, stop being so scared. Stand firm and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today, you'll never see again. And he says, the Lord will fight for you. You need to only be still. When you get to those times in your life where it's so much easier to go back and you're wondering, I don't know what to do, the Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. Sometimes, honestly, not even sometimes, all the time, the best thing you could possibly do whenever you feel stuck, you don't know what to do, is simply say, God, help. He won't say no. Loves you too much to say no. He will fight for you. You need only to be still. Why? Because God is committed to your freedom. God is committed to seeing you free. God is going to do whatever it takes to see you free. It was God who hardened Pharaoh's heart. He will send an entire Egyptian army after you if that's what it's going to take to keep you moving. He'll split an ocean if that's what it's going to take to keep you moving toward freedom. God is committed to seeing you free. And hopefully this encourages you at some point. Hopefully this is getting into your heart and your soul. God is going to do whatever it takes to see you free. And a lot of you walked in here and you honestly just feel so stuck and you feel in so much pain that you don't even know if this is true. God is going to do whatever it takes to see you free. The part that you've got to come to terms with is you have to make the choice. Because when you're standing there and you look right and the ocean's not opening, and you look left and all you see is fear and your life's just not going your way and everything's collapsing, your choice is relief or freedom. And I really, really wish that I could stand here and tell you like, man, this is the exact definition of what freedom is. And I don't know if I can, but I could show you what it's like. Freedom looks like standing at an ocean and not knowing it's gonna open and choosing not to go back because you believe the Lord will fight for you. Freedom looks like those two college students like maybe close to a year ago that came, just walked into the back offices and cut their fakes in half because they're exhausted. Just went right back there, grabbed their fakes, come in half because relief is exhausting. It's just not working anymore. Independence got them nowhere. And they've been walking with Jesus ever since. Because a lot of you are like, it's really fine and dandy that God was doing this in the Old Testament. That's really sweet that he's been freeing people in an entire country, and that's really awesome, and he split the ocean. You're wondering if he's still doing it. Because you fast forward, and you get to a point where this Jewish carpenter enters into the scene, onto the pages of history. His name's Jesus, and everybody's wondering what this guy's about, and everybody's wondering what his purpose is, and everybody wants to know who he is. And in Mark 5, you get a story of a demon-possessed man who walks up to him, and this guy's been enchained for a long part of his life. He walks up to him, and his demons are like, please don't hurt us, let us go. And Jesus, with all the right in the world to just end this man, he doesn't. He shows us what Jesus is all about. He frees him. He sets him completely free. You know what? You want to know what Jesus is about. It's freedom. And I don't think this guy woke up on a Thursday morning and said, you know what? I'm going to get possessed by a demon today. I don't think he did that at all. I think he just got lost. I think he chose relief and independence so much that he dabbled into something he never thought he'd dabble into. And all of a sudden he is completely stuck and has no option. He has no way out. And Jesus shows us what the purpose of Jesus is, and he frees him. And you just watched what freedom looks like today. You just watched a guy who's been struggling for a large majority of his life with relationships and with anxiety and struggling. And you just watched him stand here in front of all of you on a video and tell you that he chose freedom. The freedom showed up and it was his and he chose it. And I have the opportunity of being with that guy weekly. He's free. That Jewish carpenter would display one of the greatest acts of love that you and I will probably never be able to understand, because the thing about freedom is that it's actually not free. And what he would do is he would pay a penalty for you that you can never pay, and he would completely buy your freedom, and freedom is available to you. The question is, do you want it? Because some of you, honestly, you've been like Christians for like the majority of your life, but you've never tasted what freedom is. And a lot of you are walking into the first time and you're kind of realizing, wait, there's a better version of the life I'm living. And I just don't know if I can actually tell you the exact definition of what freedom is. But I can tell you that freedom isn't independence. Freedom isn't trying to convince yourself that doing what you want is what's going to make you feel free. I actually, if I'm going to try and give you a definition of it, I think it's the exact opposite. I just think freedom isn't independence. I think it's being dependent. I think it's getting to a point where you're like, I've tried walking on my own for so long and it's not working. I think actual freedom is getting to a point where you're like, if I go left, I'm done for. If I go right, I'm gonna drown. I don't know what to do. And it's standing in those awkward gaps and being like, okay, I'm not choosing what I want. I'm gonna choose to just walk with God. I think freedom is obedience, and I think freedom is dependence. I think it's getting to a point where you literally just tell God, I can't do this on my own anymore. And it's so backwards. That's why it's hard for your head to click with this and understand it, because your head can't wrap itself around the fact that freedom looks like giving your life to someone else. It's so hard for you to understand that because it's so backwards. True freedom looks like standing before God and saying, I can't do this, and he fights for you. And so in a second, the band's gonna come back out. And we're gonna do a song that a lot of you know, and it's gonna be awesome. But for a lot of you, I want you to respond in a couple different ways. Some of you just need to stay right where you are and just have a conversation with God and be like, hey, I'm tired. I actually believe you when you tell me that there's a version of life that I can actually feel whole. I believe you. So some of you just need to stay exactly where you are. Some of you need to stay seated. You can stand up. You can do whatever you want, honestly. But you just need to have a conversation with God where you say, help, and he'll fight. Some of you need to stay right where you are with the people you came with and just have a simple conversation with the things that you keep going back to relief for. Bring it out of the darkness. Once you bring the things that you're fighting with out of the dark and into the light, it has lost all of its power. And I don't care if you gotta grab 5 buddies and come sit on the carpet. I don't care if you gotta go back there and sit by the doors to find some space. Some of you just need to have a conversation with the people around you about what you keep running back to for relief. Some of you just need to be prayed for. So in a second, I've asked some of our staff and some of our volunteers to just come line up the front. And during the song, if you just want to come talk to somebody who's not going to judge you, who's not going to hold this for you, who's not going to hold this against you, someone who's just going to sit and listen and maybe give you something that you need to hear, it's somebody who's just going to pray for you, they'll be down here. And I'm going to urge you to try it. It's the worst that could happen. And some of you are going to step into freedom for what I believe is the first time. So do me a favor, will you close your eyes? I want to pray for you. God, doing things on my own is exhausting. And I just have this overwhelming feeling that there's so many people in the room have been trying to do this on their own for so long, and they're getting to a point where they realize that it's just not working anymore. God, honestly, it feels really hard to find the words to say because freedom for so many of us just feels like it's so out of reach. So many of us feel like we've messed up a little too much that freedom isn't even an option. Will you remind the person in here that is convinced that they've done far too much to still be set free, that they're not too far gone? Freedom has always been available. It's for freedom. You set us free. You will always fight for us. Thank you for giving us a taste of what actual freedom looks like, that we can leave this room and go into Athens, Georgia, and be a regular college student, but feel free and feel completely satisfied in our souls. Performing is done with. It's all done with. Our freedom has been bought. It's over. There's no more performing, none of it. We can't earn it. We couldn't deserve it. A Jewish carpenter who was God showed up on the scene and bought my freedom for me. And for a lot of you, it's clicking for the first time in your life. You don't even know how you got here tonight, but God is so committed to your freedom that he was going to get you here. So what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to be bold here in a second. But if you want to step into freedom for the first time tonight, I'm just going to ask you to just stand there and just say a simple prayer. Just in your head, will you just tell God, I've tried on my own and I'm realizing I can't do it anymore. And I need your help. And I want to put my trust, I want to put my faith in Jesus. And I do that right now. And I'm gonna ask you here in a second to just be really bold. If you made that decision tonight for the first time, you just like stand up where you're at. It does take some boldness, but that's all right. If you're one of those people, I'm gonna ask you to just stay standing. If you're someone in the room that's come to terms with the thing you've been running to for relief for so long, and you want freedom for your relief, I'm gonna ask you the same thing. Will you be bold enough to just stand up where you're at? Yeah, I mean, there's no shame. I judge you for it. I'm honestly really proud of you. Yeah. I'm gonna ask you to stay standing, and if there's somebody around you who's just standing, will you do me a favor? Will you just like extend an arm toward them? I would love to pray for you. We're gonna get into this last song. God, we love you. We say thank you. Freedom is available on a Tuesday night as much as it is on a Wednesday morning. I just pray that freedom, we understand freedom is a journey. It's something we're gonna walk in. And I pray for everybody who is standing and the people who aren't, and those times we do fall into relief, even after this, it doesn't mean our story is over. And that when we do fall into relief after this and it feels like we've relapsed a little bit, that's part of the freedom journey. We'll keep moving. You will continue fighting. Rather than the person right now that just needs prayer, give us the courage to be prayed for. Help us to respond in the way that we need to respond. Either it's sitting here, having a conversation with our friends, or being prayed for. Help us to be bold. Jesus, we love you. We thank you. It's in your name we pray.
Won't forget the wonder of how you brought deliverance, the exodus of my heart. 'Cause you found me, freed me, held back the waters from my release. Oh Yahweh, sing it loud if you know it. Say, you're the God who fights for me, Lord of every victory. Come on, if you're free tonight, I want to invite you to put your hands together. Up high. Up high. Come on. You want to know what freedom looks like? It looks like hands lifted high. Clapping them like this because you've got nothing to lose. You've already lost it all. You've already given it to Jesus. Come on. He stepped into our Egypt. 'Cause you stepped into my Egypt. You took me by the All across the room, lift your hands with me. Say, come on. You have torn apart the sea. You have torn apart the sea. You have led me through the deep. Hallelujah. Hallelujah. One more time. Sing. You're the God who fights for me, Lord of every victory. Hallelujah. Come on, sing it loud. Hallelujah. You have torn apart the sea. You have led me through the deep. Hallelujah. 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 Is anybody thankful for Jesus tonight?